Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about the interview that happens before the interview. We're talking about your online reputation and how it can literally define your career before you even get a chance to say hello. Let's dive right in.
So, just think about this for a second. Before a recruiter picks up the phone to schedule that first chat with you, what is the one thing they almost certainly do? You got it. They Google you. And whatever they find, well, that's your real first interview.
And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? That resume you spent hours perfecting, that's just one piece of the puzzle. But that first page of Google, wow, that's the book cover, the summary, and the first chapter all rolled into one.
And here's the real kicker. You've got less than 8 seconds. I'm not kidding. That's the average time a recruiter spends just scanning your online profile before they decide whether to dig deeper or just move on to the next person. Your digital first impression has to be instant and it has to be strong.
And don't think for a second that this is some rare practice. Over 90% of employers are now doing online screening. This means it's not a question of if they'll look you up, it's a question of when. And a single negative result, an old blog post, a bad review, that can silently sabotage your entire job search.
So that brings us to our first major topic, your digital first impression. This is the interview that happens when you're not even in the room. The real question is, are you ready for it?
This is where something called online reputation management, or ORM, comes into play. But please don't think of this as just damage control for when something goes wrong. For any serious professional today, this is a proactive, career protective measure. It's really about taking control of your own story. So how do you actually do it? It might sound a little intimidating, but it's really not. We're going to walk through a very simple 3-step playbook that you can use to take control of what people find when they search your name.
The playbook is super straightforward. First, you audit. Then, you strategize. And finally, you execute. It makes perfect sense, right? You can't fix what you can't see, so you have to start with an audit. Then, based on what you find, you build your strategy. And only then can you start executing the right tactics. So let's break down each one. Okay, step 1 is the digital audit. And the goal here is simple. You need to see yourself exactly how a recruiter would. That means opening up an incognito browser window so your past searches don't influence anything, and search for your full name. Then search your name plus your last company and your name plus your city. No filters. You want the raw, unfiltered results.
Now you're going to create a simple scoreboard for yourself, and you have to be brutally honest here. Anything that's negative, unflattering, or just embarrassing gets a circle. Now, count them up. How many of the top 10 results are problematic? And here's the most critical question of all. Is any of that negative stuff on page 1? This isn't about being vain. This is about understanding your risk profile.
So once you know what you're dealing with, you can decide on a strategy. You've really got 2 main paths. The first is removal. This is when you try to get content taken down at the source, usually for things like legal violations or really outdated private info. But for most of us, the go-to strategy is suppression. And that just means creating so much positive, relevant content about yourself that the negative stuff gets pushed down, way down to page 2 or 3 of the search results where almost no one ever looks.
And that leads us to the fun part, execution. This is where we start building what I like to call your positive fortress. This is how we actively suppress the negative stuff by creating this awesome wall of positive, credible content that you control.
The foundation of your fortress is built on what we call owned assets. It's a fancy term, but all it means are the profiles and platforms that you directly control. The great thing is, recruiters trust these sources, and Google loves to rank them highly when someone searches for your name. So what exactly are we talking about here? Well, LinkedIn is number 1, for sure. It needs to be sharp, detailed, and packed with the right keywords. A personal website or portfolio, that's a huge win. And then you have all these industry-specific platforms, like GitHub for developers, Medium for writers and thought leaders, or Behance for designers. The goal is to fill these spaces with high-quality content that just screams professional.
Now, here's a more advanced tactic, but it is so powerful. If there's a specific negative story tied to your name, you can actually neutralize it with targeted content. For instance, imagine writing a blog post with a title just like this one. It directly competes for those negative search terms, and it lets you reframe the entire narrative in your own words. That's taking back control.
And hey, don't sleep on video. A short professional video on YouTube, maybe a 3-minute explainer on a topic in your field, can rank incredibly well. They often show up in those video carousels on the search results page, giving you another powerful asset to push other less desirable results down. Okay, now let's get real for a minute and talk about some practicalities. This is not an overnight fix,
Managing your online reputation really requires a clear head about timelines and also knowing when you might need to call for backup.
Managing your own expectations is absolutely key here. On average, you're looking at about 6 months before you start to see a noticeable reshaping of your first page of results. And it could be up to a year for a really meaningful, solid restructuring. You got to remember, this is a long game.
And this brings us to what is, without a doubt, the single biggest mistake professionals make. They wait until they're already in the interview process to start thinking about this stuff. By then, honestly, it's often way too late for the search results to change in time. Proactive planning is everything.
You know, sometimes the DIY approach just isn't going to cut it, especially when the stakes are really high or the situation is complex. So, when should you really consider bringing in a professional ORM firm? Here's a quick little checklist. If that negative content is already sitting there on page 1, if your big job search is just around the corner, if the content involves tricky legal matters, or if you just, don't have the technical SEO skills or the time, that is the moment to look for expert help.
And you know what? This isn't just for senior executives. In fact, mid-career professionals can be even more vulnerable. Why? Because you don't have the protective brand of a huge corporation wrapped around you. Your individual search results carry so much more weight. A clean online reputation is a massive career asset.
So we'll leave you with this final thought. Right now, at this very moment, as recruiters and colleagues are searching your name, what story are they finding? Is it a story that's being written for you by some random algorithms and old content? Or is it a story that's being written and controlled by you? The choice is absolutely yours.